Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining my session. I am Ashwin Vedyanathan. I'm the VP of Customer Success and Support at Gainsight. Thanks for joining me on this session to talk about how to optimize your retention management practices. So let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen right now. So we presented this at Pulse Europe in November last year, it was pretty well received. So I'm hoping I can share some interesting insights for everyone listening to this. So firstly, why are we even talking about this? The entire idea is customer retention is the lifeblood of your company, especially as the revenue from your existing customers and the potential from your existing customers over time far exceed what you could do with new logos. That becomes an even interesting and a more relevant financial point. Not to obviously talk about that's the financial part. There are several sentiment-related pieces about retaining your customers and how that boosts morale for your companies. Even companies like Gartner are talking about 80% of future profits coming from 20% of existing customers. So maintaining customers, which then opens up additional revenue opportunities for you in the future, is obviously really important. However, if it was that easy, we wouldn't be talking about it. There are several challenges in actually optimizing your renewal and retention processes. The first one is a few common things that we hear from our customers pretty regularly is about having so much customer data in many different sources, etc. But we're still bad at forecasting renewal rates. We might be really good at forecasting for new logos, but forecasting renewal rates is still a pretty big challenge. The second one that I hear is we try to have consistent processes, but it's still every renewal becomes a firefight at the end. And we want to get more proactive, but we don't actually end up doing it. I won't go through the others, but if any of these resonate with you, know that these are very common challenges. And we hear that pretty often from our customer base as well. We've put a lot of thought into these, so I'll talk more about each one of these. So when it comes to having much customer data but still being bad at forecasting those renewal rates, what we actually think is involved in that process is ensuring that you are taking all of these data sources into account, using that to predict your likelihood to renew based on machine learning, AI, tools that are available, including Gainsight, and scientifically predicting its impact on the likelihood. So don't just depend on gut feel of people actually managing the renewal, but use data to actually predict the likelihood. In addition, you'll always have in your teams, customer-facing teams, there is knowledge of the customer sentiment at any point in time. Other subjective indicators that are not necessarily captured by data, but you want to include those in your likelihood to renew calculations as well. And when these predictions and when these predictive models do exist, what can you do to change the intervention that happens, and then actually execute on it and measure whether the intervention resulted in meaningful impact in the likelihood to renew. And what also makes this harder, in addition, are the tools that are available. Most organizations use some form of CRM, Salesforce, Dynamics, etc., to manage your opportunities, but then have offline tools in Excel and other places to actually manage your forecasting process. In addition, the question of ownership comes up all the time. Is the CSM team responsible for the renewal? Is the renewal reps or the sales teams responsible for the ownership, etc.? That adds to the complexity of making this entire process that much harder. So we obviously took a step back, looked at all the processes, the best-in-class processes, things that don't work at Gainsight, but even in our customer base, and put together a maturity model, if you will, of what renewals management looks like, from does not exist on the far left to a very advanced and optimized state on the far right. As I walk through this, it'll be a good thought experiment for all of you listening to this to also think about where you lie on the spectrum, and then what needs to change to actually move you from left to right. So at the far left is obviously a model where renewals management is very ad hoc, mostly using spreadsheets, not really using CRMs to make those calculations. You then move into a model which we call as basic or manual, where you have opportunities and certain processes deployed in the CRM for your team. And there are some processes for outreach, cadence, etc. as well as part of that process. You're now, so at least you have that tooling piece starting to take shape. You move to the intermediate stage where you actually have a pretty robust process for managing renewals, which takes into account the health of the customer at any point in time, the sentiment, certain milestones like have you done a business review within 6 months prior to the renewal coming up, etc., along with some reporting that tells you what percentage of your customers are at risk of renewal, which customers are looking good, etc. So that's where you get to with the intermediate stage. In the advanced stage, now you are have a completely automated process for even managing renewals. Ideally, you have an auto renewal process. You have a process where email automation takes care of the first outreach to your customers, and human beings intervene only when required. You're forecasting churn in a meaningful way. You've got predictive data modeling, etc., built into your health scoring piece. Like that's where we think companies need to go with their renewals management process in that advanced stage. The next thing that we are obviously trying to do with this whole process with retention management best practices is building a scalable renewal process, which obviously optimizes the success of that renewal, being it on time and the actual outcome of that renewal, but also provides, and it's an and not an or, and provides the visibility and predictability across your entire company. All the way from leadership teams to individual reps should have that visibility and predictability. And we need to do this in a way that creates really solid experience for your customers as well. So you get your outcomes as well as your experience in that whole renewals process. For the next part, what I'm going to do is actually show you how Gainsight manages the renewals process, and then also share with you how one of our customers does renewals management at scale. Both of those should give you some ideas for what you could be doing in your company as well. The three parts to how I'm going to walk through how Gainsight manages our renewals process is the first one is certain workflows for renewals reps to actually manage the idea of reaching out to customers well before time, capturing the notes from those conversations, and then you like directly working with the CRM to manage opportunities directly from Gainsight. In addition, that should be bolstered by our scorecards, which should give machine learning predictive inputs into the likelihood to renew. And then finally, reporting and dashboards that tell us whether we are doing all the right things and if they're producing meaningful impact. So the first one, which is the playbook and the workflows associated with it, what we've basically created is 120 days prior to the renewal itself, there is a workflow or a call to action, as it's called in Gainsight, that is created, and it has a best practice playbook, which includes certain emails that we want to send directly from Gainsight. This helps with keeping that consistent approach across all renewals reps. It ensures that our renewals reps and our CSMs are collaborating before making any renewal decision, which all helps towards that outcome and that experience that we are trying to drive with our renewals process. I mentioned the email as part of that workflow. What this helps with is, again, consistency and tracking, because we create a templatized email, which could even include like a video, etc., as part of that email template, which helps with ensuring that all our reps are consistently sending a similar type of email and have the ability for them to quickly add their own twist to the mix, because they can edit this before sending it out as well. As soon as you send it out, this email gets captured in our timeline, which is our note-taking part of Gainsight, as a milestone that was actually done in the renewals process. Because we are so closely linked with CRM, Salesforce Dynamics, etc., you can directly from that call to action or that workflow also update the opportunity record, or wherever you have the forecast category and all the other things that you need to maintain related to that particular renewals opportunity. This allows the renewals rep and or the CSM to not leave and bounce between different systems and manage everything from one place, which is obviously better for efficiency, etc. And then also add timeline to collaborate with cross-functionally. So oftentimes, what I see in a lot of companies is renewals reps are reaching out to customers well before time, before the renewal date, and then they're taking notes in their own offline tools, in sticky notes, etc. And all the other interactions about some exec in the company wanting to know what's going on with the renewal opportunity has to then collaborate by collaboration tools like Slack, or has to send an email to have that conversation. We want to change that and have all of these timeline notes and the calls and the meetings that you're having related to the renewal all captured in one place. And so we use our timeline capability. Again, that timeline can be updated directly from that workflow or that call to action. So you don't have to leave that screen. You can directly add your notes in that screen itself, available and visible to everyone in the company. You can also mention certain people who need to know what's going on with the customer, or you want to assign actions to people within your company. You can do all of those in timeline as well. And then I mentioned the second part. So the first part was about workflows and taking notes after conversations related to renewals with your customer. In addition, you want to have a predictive scoring model that basically tells you what is the likelihood to renew or the likelihood to churn for any particular customer. We've created a likelihood to renew score that consists of 4 parts. The first one is a predictive scoring or a machine learning scoring, which takes into account usage, support tickets. It takes into account a bunch of other variables and spits out the likelihood to actually renew or churn in this case for that particular customer. In addition, the second one that we use for our likelihood to renew score is renewal status, meaning how long before the customer's renewal date have we been sticking to the workflow that we've defined in the prior screens that I showed, and are we still on track to complete that workflow? If we are not, it suggests to me that something is off in the collaboration with the customer, and that might pose a risk in the actual retention of that customer. The third one that we do is a likelihood to renew survey. So this is us sending a survey X months prior to the actual renewal date, basically explicitly asking our customer whether at that point in time they are likely to renew or not. Depending on their response or lack of response, that can then trigger a workflow for our CSM team to then pick up the phone and have a conversation with the customer. And then the final one is renewal risk status. This is almost like an override of if there are existing risks that we've already found out. For example, bugs open or tons of support tickets open as an example. Those risks that are created by the CSM team or others in your organization can also influence, and in our case, they do influence the likelihood to renew. So creating that score that very specifically focuses on the likelihood to renew is very helpful in forecasting processes. Then the next thing that we're trying to do is obviously give more visibility and dashboards and reporting to the entire org. So one that I find pretty particularly helpful is looking at all customers and then the different likelihood to renew variables that we just discussed. Seeing it all in one place, having the ability to then sort that list based on the churn score as an example, or sort it based on the renewal date, gives me a quick bird's eye view into saying all renewals that are in the next quarter, what's the likelihood to renew, what percentage of those are at risk, and what percentage of those are looking good. So it helps me forecast that much easier. And then having other reporting mechanisms that show me of the total available to renew this quarter, how much is already renewed, how much has churned, etc., helps with the forecasting process as well. And then from an operational standpoint, also helps in knowing whether people are, whether the renewals reps and the CSMs are having conversations related to the workflows that we've defined and the best practices that we've defined for them. So looking at by month, this chart basically is by renewal month, what percentage of customers or renewals that are up for actually renewing in that month, what percentage of those or what number of those are trending in the right direction from the workflow that we've defined. So this is basically no contact had, or we've had a decision maker discussion, or the proposal has been sent, or it's very close to actually closing. Ideally, for the months that are coming up, we want to see as many in that proposal sent or closing as possible, and as few in the no contacts or decision maker discussions. So that's how we keep close tabs on how we're trending towards that. So that's how we do things at Gainsight from a renewals management optimization standpoint. I also wanted to share a story that was presented at Pulse in 2018 by a customer of ours, Jamf. Wanted to share some of the best practices that they use internally. So again, like the scale of Jamf is about 15,000 customers. So a lot of renewals that are up every quarter, every year, and obviously have unique contract dates for all customers. And no auto renew or no auto billing functionality existed at a certain point in time. They also have a small team, which essentially puts a lot of onus on a smaller team to manage these renewals on a consistent basis. So let's talk about what they did. So I'll start with the answer first, or the learnings that they had once they implemented the process. But what they realized was, one, let's focus on the transaction. Let's make this as repeatable and as automated as possible, because it's very hard for a small team to manage renewals on this scale. And then ensuring that the communications that we have with our customers, or they have with their customers, are very clear, and the call to action for the customer is very clear when it comes to renewal. And then over time, obviously allow servicing of renewals, so you don't need a human being to make those connections. So the way they set this out is starting with a kickoff process. The renewals process is kicked off. The customer is sent a usage report, after which there is a summary obtained, and then a quote is sent out, the promise of payment obtained, and then that's when the renewal is considered final. So let's see how this is actually executed in Gainsight, which is this idea of a certain feature in our product that we call Journey Orchestrator, which is a visual flow of how to manage your human and digital outreaches to your customers. So it's almost like a flow diagram, which starts with a certain subset of customers, which is that green box, which have a renewal coming up 90 days into the future. We send out an email which has certain, I'll show you templates of that email in a bit as well, but send out emails with certain calls to actions, wait for 7 days, and if the Customer hasn't responded, then send out a reminder email. Similarly, send out a second reminder in 7 days. You can control that whole process. And since then, they've also added certain other branches that say if the customer doesn't respond after 4 reminders, have a renewals rep or a CSM actually pick up the phone and talk to that customer. So ensuring that you blend your human journeys and digital journeys into one overall renewal journey is what Jamf is actually executed on. I mentioned this, but one of their key learnings or pivotal points in their process is ensuring clear and actionable communication. So simple bulleted list, 3 things on that bullet, just says, do this, submit Jamf Pro summary by X, Y, and Z date, generate the quote. Here is a link for you to do it yourself, and then submit the payment on using a PO or a credit card directly on this particular link. Making that process super simple, keeping it in simple bullet points, and then also having the ability to have it in multiple languages if you have a global organization. So that whole process is executed using Gainsight in our Journey Orchestrator engine. So they tried this process in 2018, and you can see, in 2017 and 18, and you can see that the impact to Jamf was the first one that they measured is on-time renewals. You can see that depending on the region, the on-time renewals has gone up consistently for each of the 3 regions over time, which obviously has a lot to do with how you're allowing your customers to self-serve, being very action-oriented, following up on reminders, and everything else that I just spoke about. In addition, the total number of renewals that they manage per rep also went up significantly because now they have more efficient processes. They rely on digital outreaches before bringing in a human being. So you can do a lot more with the existing team that you have. So hopefully all of you found that very helpful. Again, my name is Ashwin Vedyanathan, and available to talk more at any point about renewals and retention, and take any more questions. I'm reachable at ashvin@gainsight.com. Thank you for joining us.